Hi class, let's pick up our discussion on eukaryotes with our discussion subsection on protozoa. Protozoa comes from the Greek words meaning first animals, and we've had over 50,000, actually 65,000 species of protozoa that have been identified so far. The vast majority of protozoa are harmless. They don't do anything for us or against us. They are free-floating inhabitants in both water and soil. A very select number of protozoa have been known to cause disease in human beings, and they're responsible for a very large number of infections every year. We can have our protozoa are single-celled organisms, and they contain all of the major eukaryotic organelles except for chloroplasts. Protozoa do not go through photosynthesis on their own. The cytoplasm of a protozoa, or so this fluid and the substances inside of the cell, are divided into two main parts. We have the ecto and endoplasm. The ectoplasm is a clear outer layer that's involved in locomotion, feeding, and protection. So this is the more lateral or external portion of the cytoplasm, and then the endoplasm is a granular region that's more towards the center of the protozoal cell, and it houses most of the food and storage organelles along with the nucleus. Some organelles within the protozoa are going to have the similarities to a primitive nervous system and are used to coordinate movement within the protozoa and its external environment. The cell membrane of a protozoa is going to be selectively permeable, like all cell membranes. It will regulate what goes in and what comes out of the cell. The shape of the cell is typically going to be determined by its cytoskeleton, but it can change if needed. Most ciliates, or protozoa that have lots of cilia on their surface, are going to have a relatively constant cell shape, but protozoa that are known to move around or ooze around, so to speak, amoebas, are going to have a more fluid cell membrane. In both cases, the cytoskeleton of the protozoa is responsible for the consistency of shape or the rapidly changing shape of the protozoa. In terms of sizes, protozoas can be very small, 3 microns to 300 microns, large enough to be seen with the naked eye. Giant amoebas can even be 3 to 4 millimeters across, very easily seen with the naked eye. The nutritional needs of a protozoa and the habitat range of a protozoa vary greatly from species to species to species. Protozoa are heterotrophic, which means they need to eat food. They cannot make food. They are free living in their environment and will primarily live off of dead organic matter or occasionally on bacteria and algae. A select few species of protozoa will have feeding structures like oral grooves that help them to phagocytize food particles. Some protozoa are capable of absorbing food particles directly from the environment through their cell membrane. Typically, though, protozoa are going to phagocytize larger particles and will have direct absorption for smaller particles. Protozoas can have parasites within them, and these parasites can live on the fluids of their hosts. The main factor that limits the growth of protozoa is the availability of moisture. Most protozoa prefer a wet, moist environment. So if we have freshwater or marine water, salt water, it's not going to be that important. The important thing is the presence of water. They don't need very much water, but they must have it moist. Protozoa will preferentially grow in an aqueous environment compared to a terrestrial environment. They are also pretty tough little buggers. They can survive in extreme temperature and pH ranges, not quite as extreme as the archaeal cells, but still pretty extreme. And protozoa are going to be able to make a dormant stage. The dormant stage of a bacteria is called a bacterial endospore. The dormant stage of a protozoa is called a cyst. If we look at our protozoa, they go through different stages of their life cycle during their reproductive stages. We call a actively moving around and feeding protozoa a trophozoite. And we call a protozoa that's been put into long-term storage, so to speak, a cyst. A good comparison or analogy would be the trophozoite is like a vegetative bacterial cell, and the cyst is like the bacterial endospore. The cyst can remain dormant for very long periods of time and will then come out of dormancy when exposed to favorable environmental conditions. These protozoal cysts can be dispersed by air currents and or water currents, and is an important factor that we as humans need to consider in limiting the spread of diseases. Here we can see a trophozoite that's actively moving and feeding, and then it's expiring some harsh environmental conditions. That trophozoite can then turn into a cyst, and when the environmental conditions are favorable, another trophozoite will burst out of the cyst and begin to actively reproduce and eat and feed again. Some groups of protozoa will only exist in the trophozoite stage. These are the minority. Most groups can alternate between trophozoite and the cyst stages. If we look at Trichomonas vaginalis, it's a common STD. It does not form cyst and must be transmitted by intimate contact. Other notable protozoa include Entoamoeba histolytica and Giardia lamblia, which form cysts and are readily transmitted through contaminated water and food. All protozoas are going to have simple asexual reproduction, so there is no sex. We do not have father and mothers, so to speak, with protozoa that contribute genetic information. Instead, protozoa are going to be asexual. One protozoa cell can reproduce all by itself through mitotic cell division. Every once in a while, you'll see multiple fission for reproduction, but that's the exception to the trend. Sexual reproduction can occur in protozoa when they will have conjugation. Conjugation is going to occur in the ciliates, where they will fuse their cells and exchange micronuclei. These micronuclei are clusters of chromosomes contained in a double lipid bilayer. This results in a very new cell that has a unique genome and will have slightly different characteristics that can maybe give it slight advantages or slight disadvantages depending on what characteristics are being conferred. Here we see a figure summarizing the wide variety of protozoa that are available in nature. We have the large amoeboid protozoas, we have ciliated protozoas, we have protozoa with flagella, and then we have very tiny protozoa with no notable form of locomotion. So, concept checked. If we looked at the active feeding, motile stage of a protozoal lifestyle, would it be the cyst, the endospore, the trophozoite, the merozoite, or all of the above? So, pause the video and flip back in your PowerPoint presentation, or rewind the video and get me an answer. The correct answer is trophozoite, C. And that's all we have on protozoa. If you have any questions, please shoot me an email or post them on the discussion board. Happy studies!